love, as God designed it, is one of the most profound and powerful forces in existence. A force that can heal, transform, and renew. When we talk about love, we're not just talking about an emotion or a fleeting feeling. We are talking about the essence of God's character, the very heartbeat of who He is. The Bible tells us God is love, and if we are His children, then we are called to walk in that same love. Jesus set the example for us, showing us a love that sacrifices, that serves, and that uplifts. He said in John 13:34, "A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another." This command isn't merely a suggestion. It's an invitation to a new way of life, a life where love becomes the guiding principle, the very foundation of everything we do. Jesus knew that love would be our greatest witness to the world, a reflection of God's own love that reaches far beyond our limitations, transforming the lives of others and bringing blessings back into our own lives in ways we could never anticipate. Imagine this. God's love for us is boundless, limitless, and unfathomably deep. He gives it freely and without reservation, asking only that we share that love with others. But here's the incredible part. When we give love, when we pour out from the love God has poured into us, God blesses us in return. Not only does He bless us, but He multiplies that love, doubling the blessings in ways we may not always see immediately, but which become evident over time. Love, in God's hands, becomes like a seed planted in fertile soil. When we share it, God nurtures it, causing it to grow, flourish, and bear fruit that will touch lives in ways we may never know. Every act of love is a seed sown into the kingdom of God, and every seed, in its own time, will yield a harvest of blessings, not just for those we love, but for ourselves as well. Think about what our lives could look like if we truly embraced this principle. If we gave love freely without expecting anything in return, simply trusting that God would take our offerings and turn them into something greater. This is what Jesus meant when He said, "It is more blessed to give than to receive," Acts 20:35. He wasn't just talking about material gifts. He was talking about the gift of compassion, the gift of compassion, the gift of kindness. When we give, we align ourselves with the very heart of God, and there is a deep, abiding joy in that alignment. This joy isn't the fleeting happiness the world offers. It's a lasting, fulfilling joy that comes from knowing we are part of something greater than ourselves, part of God's grand design to bring healing, hope, and blessing to the world. Our love, when given in faith, becomes a powerful testimony of God's goodness. Every act of love, whether it's a simple smile, a kind word, a helping hand, or a sacrificial gesture, reflects God's love to those around us. In a world where so many people are hurting, where so many feel unloved and overlooked, our acts of love become beacons of light. They show people that there is a God who sees them, who values them, and who cares deeply for them. And as we give love, we open ourselves up to receive more of God's blessings. It's a divine cycle. The more we give, the more we receive. Not because we are trying to earn God's favor, but because God, in His goodness, delights in blessing those who walk in His ways. What happens when we give love? We begin to experience the very heart of God. The act of loving others, especially when it's difficult or inconvenient, draws us closer to Him. We start to see the world through His eyes, to feel His compassion, and to desire what He desires, to feel His compassion and to desire what He desires. Our priorities shift. We care less about ourselves and more about the people around us. And in this process, God transforms us. He stretches us, molds us, and softens us, filling our hearts with a joy and peace that the world cannot offer. It's as if He takes the love we give, multiplies it, and pours it back into our lives, blessing us in ways that are often unexpected but deeply fulfilling. When we give love, we are not diminishing ourselves. We are growing in God's grace, stepping into a life that is richer and fuller than anything we could have planned. When we live with an open heart, willing to love freely, we find that God's blessings come in many forms. Sometimes the blessing comes in the form of peace during a storm, strength in times of weakness, or joy that rises up even in difficult seasons. Other times, it's the relationships we build, the lives we touch, and the love that returns to us in unexpected ways. God's blessings aren't always material. They are often spiritual, emotional, and relational, filling the deepest places in our hearts with His presence. And as we continue to give love, as we continue to serve and care for others, we find that God's blessings keep multiplying, overflowing into our lives and the lives of those around us. So let's embrace this call to live a life of love. Not just because it's a command, but because it's the life God created us for. When we give love, we are participating in God's divine work, partnering with Him to bring His light, His hope, and His blessings to a world in need. And as we do, we can trust that God, in His boundless generosity, will pour blessings into our lives that exceed our greatest expectations. He is faithful, He is good, and He delights in blessing His children. So let's go forward with open hearts, ready to give, ready to love, and ready to receive all that God has in store. The stories of Ruth and the Good Samaritan remind us that God's blessings are often hidden within the act of giving itself, a truth that transforms not only the receiver, but also the giver in profound and lasting ways. When Ruth chose to stay with Naomi, she didn't know where her journey would lead. She only knew that love compelled her to stay, to serve, and to sacrifice. Her decision to love without expecting anything in return was a defining moment of faith, a choice that aligned her heart with God's own heart. She may have had every reason to return to her homeland to rebuild her life on her own terms, but instead she committed herself to love and serve Naomi, come what may. That commitment to love opened the door to blessings beyond what Ruth could ever have envisioned. Blessings not only for herself and Naomi, but for generations to come. In this selfless act, Ruth became part of God's eternal plan. Her simple, unselfish love was woven into the lineage that would bring forth King David and ultimately the Savior of the world, Jesus Christ. Her life teaches us that when we give love without expecting anything in return, God sees it, values it, and multiplies it in ways we cannot fully comprehend. The beauty of this truth is that God doesn't limit His blessings to material things. He blesses us in ways that reach into the deepest parts of our lives. When we choose to love, we open ourselves to blessings that enrich our character, strengthen our faith, and connect us more deeply to Him. Just as Ruth's love led to a legacy, our acts of love can lead to legacies that impact countless lives. This is God's design. He multiplies the blessings of love, taking what we give in faith and expanding its reach, far beyond what we can see or measure. It's as if each act of love is a spark that God uses to ignite a fire, spreading warmth, light, and life to others in ways that go beyond our limited understanding. Each time we give love, we are planting seeds in God's kingdom, seeds that He faithfully waters, nurtures, and brings to harvest. This divine multiplication is a mystery, a profound truth that encourages us to live generously, knowing that every act of love matters, every kindness counts, and every sacrifice is seen and honored by our Heavenly Father. In the parable of the Good Samaritan, Jesus reveals another dimension of love's power. The Samaritan's decision to stop and help a stranger was radical, a decision that broke social and cultural barriers. He didn't have to stop. He didn't have to care. Yet when he saw the wounded man lying by the road, he was moved by compassion. Compassion, born of love, led him to take action, to bind the man's wounds, to carry him to safety, and to pay for his care. The Samaritan's love was more than words. It was a love in motion, a love that stepped into the pain and need of another, offering hope and healing. This story has echoed through the centuries as a model of God's love. A love that crosses every boundary, that doesn't hold back, and that gives even when it's inconvenient or costly. Jesus used this parable to teach us that true love doesn't discriminate. It reaches out to all, regardless of who they are or where they come from. And in doing so, it brings blessing not only to the one who receives, but to the one who gives. The Samaritan's love didn't just heal the wounds of a stranger. It became a testimony of God's compassion and mercy. This is the kind of love God calls us to embody. A love that transcends self, interest, that breaks down barriers, and that brings healing to a hurting world. And as we give this kind of love, God's blessings follow. They may not always be immediate or visible, but they are certain. God has promised that He will reward those who love as He loves, that He will pour blessings into the lives of those who give generously, selflessly, and compassionately. When we step out in faith to love others, we enter into the flow of God's grace, positioning ourselves to receive blessings that are pressed down, shaken together, and running over. God's blessings come in many forms. Peace that surpasses understanding, joy that springs up even in hardship, strength that carries us through trials, and relationships that enrich our lives. God's love is not transactional. He doesn't ask us to give so we can receive. But He delights in blessing those who walk in His ways, who mirror His love to others. When we love, we are not only following a command, we are entering into God's purpose for our lives. We become partners with Him, instruments of His grace, reflections of His compassion in a world that is hungry for hope and healing. Our love, given in faith, becomes part of God's divine work, touching lives, transforming hearts, and opening doors to blessings that are beyond our understanding. The love we give sets into motion a cycle of blessing that flows from God to us and through us to others. It is a love that builds, that heals, and that sustains. A love that draws us closer to God and closer to the people He calls us to serve. When we live a life of love, we are opening ourselves up to blessings that are richer and deeper than anything this world can offer. The rewards of love are not always seen immediately, but they are certain. Sometimes the blessing is simply the joy of knowing we have made a difference, of feeling God's pleasure in our obedience. Other times it is the strength that God provides in return, the peace that fills our hearts, or the unexpected ways in which others bless us in return. But beyond these, There is the spiritual reward, the growth in our own relationship with God. As we give love, our hearts expand, our spirits grow stronger, and our understanding of God's love deepens. We become more like Christ, transformed by the very act of giving love. As we look at these stories and reflect on God's promises, let us be inspired to live with open hearts, willing to love freely and fully. Let us trust that each act of love, however small, is a seed that God will grow into something beautiful. And let us be ready to receive the blessings that God has promised. Blessings that are multiplied, blessings that are multiplied, blessings that reach beyond us. Blessings that enrich our lives and the lives of those we touch. When we choose to give love, we don't just impact the lives of others. We experience God's presence and blessings in a way that fills our own hearts with peace, joy, and fulfillment that can only come from Him. Giving love is more than a command. It's an invitation to step into the heart of God, to feel His compassion, and to be His hands and feet in a world longing for hope. When we open ourselves to love others, we begin to see life through God's eyes. Our perspective shifts from focusing on our needs and desires to seeing the needs of those around us. We become less concerned with ourselves and more connected to God's purpose for our lives. And as we give, God draws near to us, blessing us with a deeper sense of His presence, a closeness that reassures us that we are walking in His will. Think about the joy that fills your heart when you serve others or extend kindness. That feeling isn't just a fleeting emotion. It's a touch of God's Spirit, a reminder that we were created for this, to love, to give, to reflect the heart of our Creator. In those moments, we are walking in the purpose God designed for us, experiencing a joy that the world cannot give. It is in giving that we receive, in serving that we receive, in serving that we find fulfillment, and in loving that we discover the heart of God. Each act of love is like a small echo of God's own character shining through us. This is why when we give love, it doesn't leave us empty. Instead, it fills us with a sense of purpose, of divine connection, of being part of something infinitely greater than ourselves. But God's blessings don't stop with our feelings of joy and purpose. He promises to multiply the love we give, to pour blessings into our lives in ways we might never have anticipated. Luke 6:38 tells us, "Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." Imagine that God is promising not just to return what we give, but to bless us abundantly, overflowing. This isn't just about material blessings. It's about the fullness of life, the richness of spirit, and the satisfaction that comes from living in alignment with God's will. When we pour out love, God takes that love, multiplies it, and brings it back to us in ways that strengthen our faith, deepen our relationships, and fill us with an abiding peace. The blessings that come from giving love often arrive in unexpected forms. Sometimes it's in the form of a restored relationship, a newfound peace in our hearts, or the strength to overcome challenges we once thought insurmountable. Other times it's through the people God brings into our lives, people who uplift us, encourage us, and walk alongside us. And often God's blessings are spiritual, intangible, yet profoundly transformative. He shapes our character, molding us to be more like Christ. He fills us with a resilience, a joy, a grace that allows us to face life with courage and compassion. These are the blessings that sustain us, that enable us to be a light to others, that give us the capacity to keep loving even when it's hard. The love we give is also a seed planted in the kingdom of God, a seed that bears fruit in ways we may never fully see or understand. Every kind word, every act of compassion, every selfless gesture plants a seed that God will nurture, causing it to grow and touch lives beyond what we can imagine. When we give love, we are investing in God's eternal kingdom. The impact of our love goes far beyond the here and now. It ripples through time, touching hearts and lives in ways only God knows. There's no love given in faith that God does not see, value, and multiply. He takes what we give and expands its reach, using it to bring healing, hope, and grace to others. And in doing so, He blesses us with the knowledge that we're part of His divine work. When we give love, we are walking in the footsteps of Jesus, who gave everything for us. Jesus didn't hold back His love. He gave it freely, fully, sacrificially. And in following His example, we too find ourselves filled, not depleted. We discover that God's love is an endless reservoir, a source that never runs dry. The more we give, the more He pours into us, filling us with His Spirit, His joy, and His peace. This is the beautiful paradox of God's love. The more we pour out, the more we receive. In a world that often teaches us to hold on tightly, to look out for ourselves first, God invites us to a different way, a way that brings blessings beyond measure. He calls us to live open-handedly, to trust that when we give, He will provide, and to believe that in His kingdom, love given is never lost, but always multiplied. So as we continue to give love, let's remember that we are stepping into the very heart of God's plan for our lives. Let us trust that each act of love is a step closer to Him, a step that brings us deeper into His purpose and blessings. And let us give with joyful hearts, knowing that we are not only blessing others, but we are also opening ourselves to the rich, overflowing blessings that only God can give. In this life of giving, we are walking in God's light, living out His call, and experiencing a joy that no words can truly capture, a joy rooted in His boundless love for us and His desire to pour blessings into our lives. The promise of God's multiplied blessings for those who give love freely and generously is one of the most beautiful truths woven throughout Scripture. It speaks to a divine economy that is so different from the world's way of thinking. In God's kingdom, giving love doesn't leave us with less. It brings us into a life that is richer, fuller, and more deeply connected to the heart of our Creator. God doesn't ask us to give out of scarcity or fear, but out of trust in His abundant provision. He invites us to live with open hands and open hearts, confident that when we pour out love, He is faithful to fill us back up, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. When we step out in faith to love others, God doesn't just meet us halfway. He pours out blessings that exceed what we could ever ask for or imagine. This promise is more than just a spiritual concept. It's a reality that touches every area of our lives. Think about the peace that settles in our hearts when we choose to let go of bitterness and instead respond with love. Think of the joy that fills our spirits when we reach out to help someone in need, expecting nothing in return. These moments are gifts from God, blessings that come as a result of loving others as He has loved us. And what's remarkable is that God's blessings aren't always what we might expect. They are often subtle, sometimes invisible to the eye. but they are deeply felt in the soul. They might come in the form of increased patience, a gentle spirit, or the strength to forgive. They might show up as a renewed sense of purpose, a fresh joy in our walk with Him, or the healing of a broken relationship. God's blessings are as varied as the ways He works in our lives, and each one is a reminder of His faithfulness. As we live out this calling to give love, God shapes us to look more like Christ. In loving others, we begin to embody the characteristics that mark Jesus' life: compassion, humility, and grace. We start to care about what God cares about, to seek out those who are hurting, and to be a source of encouragement and hope. This transformation is one of the greatest blessings of all. God doesn't just bless us with external gifts. He blesses us with an inner change that draws us closer to Him. He grows us, matures us, and prepares us to walk in His purpose. The more we give, the more we find ourselves becoming the people He created us to be. And as we love, we discover that our lives are part of something so much greater than ourselves. We are part of God's story, a story that is unfolding every day, reaching into the hearts of those around us and pointing them to the one who loves them beyond measure. In giving love, we also begin to experience God's presence in a way that is profoundly intimate and deeply personal. Jesus told us in Matthew 25:40, "Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." When we love others, we are, in a sense, loving Christ Himself. This act of love connects us to God in a unique way, bringing us into His presence and allowing us to experience His love in return. It's as if in each act of kindness, God meets us, reminding us that He is with us, that He is with us, that He sees our efforts, and that He delights in our willingness to serve. There's a closeness we feel to God when we live lives marked by love, a closeness that fills us with peace, renews our strength, and gives us hope for each new day. When we love others, we are reflecting God's heart, and in doing so, we encounter His heart more deeply ourselves. And perhaps one of the most profound blessings of giving love is the way it inspires others to do the same. Our acts of love have a ripple effect reaching beyond what we can see, touching lives in ways we may never fully understand. When we choose to love, we set an example that others notice. People are drawn to the light of God's love. They are moved by the compassion and grace that flow from those who follow Christ. Our love can inspire others to seek God, to turn to Him in their own lives, and to begin living in a way that reflects His love to those around them. This is how God's kingdom grows, one act of love at a time, each of us contributing in our own unique way to the work He is doing in the world. And as we love, we are blessed to see the fruit of our labor, not because we seek recognition, but because God, in His kindness, allows us to witness the impact of His love at work through us. God's blessings are both immediate and eternal. Some we see in this life, while others are stored up in heaven, awaiting a day when we will fully understand the scope of what He has done through our willingness to give love. We may not always see the immediate result of our love, but we can trust that God is at work, multiplying each act of kindness, each word of encouragement, and each moment of compassion. He is the God of abundance, the God who takes what we give and uses it to change lives, including our own. And in the end, we are blessed not only by the gifts He gives, but by the journey itself. The joy of walking with Him, the peace of knowing we are in His will, and the deep abiding satisfaction of being part of His work on earth. So let us continue to give love generously, knowing that God is faithful to multiply our efforts and to fill us with blessings that we cannot measure. Let us remember that when we love, we are stepping into God's purpose for our lives, a purpose that brings fulfillment, joy, and a legacy that reaches far beyond our own lives. The love we extend to others is more than just a reflection of our faith. It is a tangible representation of God's own heart working through us. Every time we choose love, we are participating in a story that God began long ago, a story of redemption, compassion, and grace. This is not a small calling. It's a life-altering invitation from the Creator of the universe to be His hands, His feet, His voice in a world longing for hope and meaning. And when we respond to this invitation, we discover that God is not only working through us, but also within us, transforming our lives, filling us with His Spirit, and blessing us in ways that go far beyond our expectations. Imagine a life where love is your driving force, where every interaction, every decision, and every moment is shaped by a commitment to love others as Christ has loved you. In this life, love becomes the language of your faith, the way you communicate God's presence to those around you. People see something different in you, something that can only be explained by the presence of God. This is the legacy of a life filled with love. A legacy that impacts not only the lives of those you touch, but also your own life in profound and beautiful ways. God sees your love, He values your sacrifice, and He honors your willingness to step out in faith. And in return, He blesses you with a joy that is unshakable, a peace that surpasses understanding, and a purpose that fills every day with meaning. Consider the incredible promise that God makes to those who love generously. In 2 Corinthians 9:8, we are reminded that God is able to bless you abundantly, so that in all things at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. This is God's heart for you, that as you pour out love, He will pour into you, ensuring that you lack nothing and that you are equipped to continue in this beautiful mission. His blessings are not merely rewards. They are His presence, His guidance, His presence, His strength, and His provision. He knows what you need even before you ask, and He delights in giving you more than you could ever ask for or imagine. When you live a life marked by love, you are never alone. God is with you, working in you and through you, blessing you at every step. This is the power of God's love at work in your life. Each time you choose to love, you are building a legacy, planting seeds that will bear fruit in ways you may never see this side of eternity. Each act of love, no matter how small, contributes to God's eternal kingdom, bringing light to darkness, healing to brokenness, and hope to despair. And this is the remarkable truth. God doesn't just multiply your love in the lives of others. He multiplies it in your own life too. He fills your heart with His joy, your mind with His peace, and your spirit with His strength. You find that as you give, you are not left with less, but with more love, more hope, more hope, more hope, more faith. This is the miracle of God's divine economy. What we give away is multiplied back to us, overflowing, abundant, and life-changing. So as we go forth, let us be people who live out this truth with every fiber of our being. Let us choose to love, not because it is easy, but because it is easy, but because it is right, Let us choose to give freely, knowing that God is faithful to bless and to provide. Let us choose to see every person we encounter as a beloved child of God, worthy of compassion, grace, and kindness. And as we do, let us be prepared to receive the blessings that God has promised, blessings that will fill us, sustain us, and carry us through whatever life may bring. Imagine a world transformed by love, a world where each of us lives fully surrendered to God's calling, letting His love flow through us in every situation. Imagine the impact, the healing, the hope that would spread like wildfire, touching lives, restoring communities, and drawing people to the one who is the source of all love. This is the vision that God has for His kingdom, a kingdom where love reigns, where grace abounds, and where blessings flow freely. And you are part of that vision. Your life, your love, your faith, all of these contribute to God's grand design. Every time you choose to give love, you are not only fulfilling God's call, but also experiencing the fullness of life that He has promised. So let us commit to this journey with open hearts and willing spirits. Let us be ready to love in ways that are bold, fearless, and sacrificial. Let us trust that God will take every act of love and use it for His glory, blessing us in return with a joy that cannot be contained, a peace that cannot be shaken, and a hope that will endure. This is the life God is calling us to, a life overflowing with His blessings, a life that reflects His love to the world, a life that leaves an eternal impact. As we walk forward, may we carry this truth in our hearts. We are not just called to receive God's love, but to share it, to live it, to be a shining example of His grace. Let's go out with the assurance that God goes with us, that His Spirit empowers us, and that His blessings will follow us as we live out His love. Go forward, knowing that each step you take in love brings you closer to God's heart, closer to His purpose, and closer to the blessings He has prepared for you. May your life be a light, a testimony, a beacon that points others to the one who loves us all beyond measure. Go in faith, go in love, and know that God's blessings are with you now and always.